Welcome to the Last in Line podcast, where we discuss faith, hope, and truth in the lives of amazing servant leaders. You are in the right place if you crave purpose and if you hunger for a life of significance. This podcast applies biblical truth to our daily lives, and we pray that you walk away encouraged and inspired. This is the Last in Line podcast.
Hey, we're honored to bring you some good news. Recent development in our sponsorship programs. We are now partnering with Christ Coffee, who is an online business that is working to save children from sex trafficking, and they are spreading the gospel throughout the world. Christ Coffee is more than just a brand. It is a movement where each cup is a testament to their commitment to high quality beans, the spread of the gospel, and making a tangible impact in the community and around the world. For those of you that don't know, which I know all of you do, trafficking of any kind, of kids, adults, men, women, is a major epidemic. More than 1 million children are being exploited, and you can actually make a dent in that in a good way, and help take a part in setting some of those kids free when you shop at Christ Coffee. 10% of every sale is donated to the rescue of children and the spread of the gospel. Their mission, guys, we can partner with that. And each cup you brew actually does go to saving a child. So they're actually blessing us and our customers, our listeners, with a discount. So type in Last in Line and you'll get 10% off of your first order. And it is quality premium coffee beans. Gentlemen, the dark roast is some of the best I've ever had. So don't wait. Go to Christ Coffee, order your first bag, use Last in Line for 10% off that first order, and I guarantee you'll keep coming back. Brew a cup, rescue a child with Christ Coffee. I'd like to welcome back to the show Mr. Josh Khachadourian, who has become a good friend of mine and is in similar space of manhood and masculinity, biblically based. And he is the founder of a mission called the Standard 59, which he wrote a book called that. And most recently, he has written a book and released one called Kingdom Driven that I had the pleasure of reading. And Josh, one of his main pillars of his ministry is that every man has a purpose, needs a mission, and is called to walk in power. And he pulled the name of his mission, Standard 59, out of Isaiah 59:19. It says, when the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will lift up a standard against him. Josh has made it his mission to call men into alignment and to raise the standard in their daily walk. He got his start in business as an entrepreneur after college. He started a fitness company, grew that into a storefront, and then 3 locations. And after that, he decided to jump into the corporate world and has been working for a company that's a Fortune 500 company as a sales rep, in the corporate environment as a trainer. He's been in account management, leadership, coaching, and development with this company for 15 years. He believes in doing everything with excellence and honor, and he believes in family, which is the main reason he started this, is to serve you and I as men and to show us the standard and help us align our purpose and our calling to be driven toward what Jesus has called us to do. So welcome him back for the second time, and we're here to discuss his book, Kingdom Driven. It gets very thorough in our conversation. It gets extremely educational. And so I took a lot away from this. I know you will too. Josh does a great job of segmenting the book into parts and bulleting high points and really pulling out and extracting practical application for us. So with that, help me welcome Josh Khachadourian. to Last in Line podcast for a second time. Well, for those of you that don't know, or maybe had a little memory lapse on the guy that we're having as our guest, you'll remember once he starts talking. But I'd like to formally welcome my friend Josh Khachadourian back to Last in Line podcast for a second time. Welcome,
John,
brother.
bro, I'm honored. Thank you so much for having me back on. You're doing amazing work, and I'm pumped to be here with you today. So thank you so
Dude,
much.
I remember when we did it before. I was on yours, you were on mine, and you came
Yeah.
out with the standard, and then you got connected with YouVersion and put out you're probably going to do a devotional with this book if you haven't already. And man, you've been busy because you kind of took a step away from, I guess, social media a little bit when it comes to posting all the time and consistently, and then you were pretty busy. So maybe just give the listeners a little bit of update with you personally in the last, I don't know, 6 to 12 months, and kind of where this book was born, how it was born.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for the opportunity. It really is an honor to be here. We have very similar paths, to remind the audience, we both work in the corporate environment, the same exact industry.
Yeah.
And we're both also like pursuing the call of God on our life and walking that out to see how does that express itself with you doing what you do and me doing what I do. So again, John, honored to be on the show with you. So your listeners might remember you did an awesome job. I wrote this book and released it in 2020 called The Standard, Discovering Jesus as the Standard for Masculinity. From there, that led me to launching a podcast about a year later, Raising the Standard. You were awesome to come on my show and be a guest. And been doing that for about over a year. We got 100 episodes. And then towards, I don't know, somewhere along a year or two in, I started a group. My heart has always been actually to coach and to minister to guys and to facilitate an environment where we can really facilitate the transformation process from a kingdom perspective, not just your generic life coaching, personal development stuff, which is great. It's out there. But as a believer, I feel like sometimes when we go down those roads of just the general, generic, be the best version of yourself messaging, it's missing something for guys like us. Like, we're building on a different foundation, right? We hold ourselves accountable to a different standard, which is Jesus. And so I've been endeavoring to put a group together that I call the Standard 59 Mastermind. So you're right. For the past year, I laid off social media a little bit. I'm still on there, still posting from time to time, but I wasn't heavy into getting stuff out. And I've also took a step back from the podcast. However, I have not stepped away from creating, from ministering, and from like exactly what I just said, like letting that expression of what God put in our hearts, like how does that come out? It's just been expressing itself with a smaller group of men that I've been working with for the past year. And over that last year time period, I sat down and I started writing, and I wrote a new book called Kingdom Driven, which we're going to talk about today. And I call this the definitive guide for how driven Christian men like you and me can dominate in life. And what's that look like? And it's written in a guide format, easy to consume. Like you were telling me, it was a pretty easy read, but also a powerful, impactful read.
Yeah.
And with the release of this book, I'm back, man. I'm happy to be here. You're actually the first show that I'm on as a guest as I launch this book, and I'm getting ready to kick up my podcast again as well. So everyone can expect some more content. So thanks, John.
Hey, man, I'm glad for the update. And as they say, Last in Line is always on the cutting edge. We're always the first to do anything. No, that's cool that we're first. I'm glad. We'll just get this right out pretty soon too, and
Awesome.
try to connect you with some other podcasts that I know, and they're a little smaller like we are. I mean, we're growing.
I appreciate it.
Those kinds of things, and we'll get Joe Rogan. We'll get you over there eventually at some point.
Hey, listen, I just want to say this. I want to honor you because what the listeners are hearing right now is not normal, right? Like, in the world, people are trying to build their platforms, sometimes push other people down. And what you're modeling right now is honor. And you're honoring me, I'm honoring you, but that's the key to promotion. So, John, I believe your podcast is going to go to the next level as you do things like this. Like, man, that's what God sees. He respects that. And that's how promotion comes. And it's true in your life because it's true in my life. Whenever I honored other people, the Lord honored me. because I
Mhm.
sowed it. And, it's actually the law of sowing and reaping.
Yeah.
When you sow something, you reap it. And, even with this new book, I don't say this, but I don't talk about this a lot, but I'll say it now because I want to illustrate the point
Mhm.
that I know people that are authors that needed some help, and I helped them. And I said, you
Mhm.
know what? I'm going to cover the charge for that cover of your book. We need to make it look right. There's someone else
Mm.
I'm working with right now. I said, I'm going to help you release this because I know it's going to be powerful. And I'm not doing it for a different result, but I know because I do it that the Lord's going to honor me as well. That's not
Mhm.
my motive. My motive is just to help someone else. But you can't help it. That's the way the kingdom works, man. So thank you so much for
You're
having me
welcome.
on.
Thanks for saying that. And who would I be if I didn't live what our scripture is? That's the foundation of this podcast in
Right.
Mark 9:35. That says, "He who wants to be first will be last of all and servant of all." So God
Bro.
will do the promoting, right? God will take care of it. And if it's good enough for the Marine Corps, I know the most decorated officers eat last in the mess hall, and the lowest enlisted guys eat first. So if it's
Right.
good enough for them, I mean, I can take a lesson from that. But yeah, kingdom driven, like you talk about guys who want to dominate in life. This is the guide. This is the guidebook. This is the roadmap. And I read it pretty quickly. Thanks for sending me that. But I mean, I just couldn't help but see how you like literally are dropping breadcrumbs along the trail that make it easy, but it's chock full of wisdom. It's chock full of just meat on the bone. And so guys that read it don't get kind of mesmerized by, it's 120 pages. It's 120 pages of all you can chew. So it's very deep, but it's very concise and very like easily digestible. Let's just put it that way. Um, Man, I want to read a quote actually from it. I may read a couple of quotes if you're all right hearing
Yeah,
yourself
go
back to
for it.
you. So you say that most men have leveled off and are suffering from mediocrity. So I know you go into kind of why you're saying that throughout the book, but give us in a nutshell, why that's glaringly obvious to you.
Yeah, let's start with the premise of the book, right? Because this will frame everything up. And I'm just going to drop one more breadcrumb for your listeners.
Yeah,
If you stick
yeah.
around to the end, I'm going to give you the book for free. So,
Okay.
John, thanks for letting me do that. Right. So
Yeah.
you got to listen to
Nice.
the whole podcast, but I'm going to drop a link because you can get the book on Amazon, but I'll just give you a copy for free because I want to get it into as many hands as possible. So,
Mhm.
to really understand what does it mean to be kingdom driven? What's it mean to be this man that's pursuing and running after something? I think about the Apostle Paul in Philippians chapter 3. He's pressing, right? He's pushing. It's this picture of all these
Mhm.
awesome athletic and military metaphors of a man who's not living mediocrity, right? He's going after what he calls the highest prize, the upward call, right? And it's this journey, it's this quest that we're all called into. And most of us, just because of present day Christianity, we get saved and we think that's it. And that's all there is. So I know your listeners are going to be the majority of them are Christian men. So you're listening to this and you go to church on Sunday and you punch the clock or you're building your business or whatever you're doing, climbing the ladder. And mediocrity can slip in because we don't have a goal. We don't have an objective, or we don't have a very clear vision of what our purpose is, a corporate purpose and an individual purpose. And so that's what I mean when we're living in mediocrity. It doesn't mean you're living a bad life, right? You can be living
Mhm.
a very good life with a great paycheck and still be living mediocre, because if you're living below your potential, if you're living below your calling, then to
Mhm.
me, anything less than that is mediocrity,
That's right.
right? So we have to look at what was in God's heart when he created man. And so that's why the book starts off with, what is the dominion mandate that God gave to man? And then we start talking about what are the enemies standing in the way. And then we talk about the biggest enemy. And then what do we do to get out of it? And I give you a framework. And then really it ends with the next step of like, how do I put this all together? So that's the book in 30 seconds, but we'll go wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, you took a little pressure off of me. We don't have to talk about it now. We can just talk about golf or whatever you want to talk. No, yeah, because we are going to peel back some of the layers for sure. Because, like I said, I took some notes, and I'm gonna. These are kind of notes that you keep. It's not just notes that you jot down because you want to interview somebody who wrote the book, these are notes that are going to be a good reference guide and along with the book, because I've pulled out what I thought was maybe resonating most with me. So you break it into 4 parts, right? Which is awesome. But before I go into the first part, which is destined for dominion, right? And you're going to go into what men say they all want, right? The dominion mandate that you kind of touched on. But first, you said a quote too here that says, being kingdom driven is about being relentless in your pursuit of God's highest calling for man. Just kind of what you just said. It's not about settling or being content, right, with a ticket to heaven. Because I think that's some guys, when good is good enough, like I'm going to heaven, check that box, I'm good, right? It's all about reaching. This is what you say. It's all about reaching the full potential and developing into your full stature so you can receive and give God his full inheritance. So tell me I know I sort of repeated you on part of that, but this part at the end, so that you can receive and give God his full inheritance. Maybe talk more about that a little more in context.
Yeah. So we're going to do deep Bible study for a moment, because in Christianity, unfortunately, we're in a very superficial environment. We're in a reels environment. We're in, hey, give me something really quick that I can digest. And the word is so deep. God's purpose is so deep. We really want to get into the meat of the word. So I'm going to take you into some meat for a moment. And there's something in Scripture called the eternal purpose. Right now, we're all crazy about what's our purpose? What's my purpose, right? And if you go to any church on any given Sunday, if I asked you, John, and if I asked listeners right now, if you just walked in and you listened, what would you take away? Here's a couple ideas of what you might take away from what you think Christianity is all about. I'll put them in a couple buckets. One, we might think God wants me to be successful. You might say, hey, there's a lot of positive thinking here. There's stuff like that. Someone might say, hey, it's all about evangelism. Like, this whole thing is about bringing other people to the Lord. It's all about evangelism.
Seeker friendly. Yeah.
There could be seeker friendly stuff. It could go to the other side. There could be social justice stuff, like, okay, we need to make the world a better place. It could get into a different stream where it's all about signs, wonders, miracles, and we need to do the healings just like Jesus did. You have all these different aspects of what you think Christianity might be about, the central focus, right? But there's something in God's heart, and we see this unveiled through Scripture. It starts in Genesis, but really, if you want to look at the pinnacle of what I'm talking about here, and actually the term eternal purpose, it's something that comes out in Paul's letter to the Ephesians. Now, what's interesting about the book of Ephesians is that Paul wrote that letter later in his life. So everything Paul wrote was inspired. It's all the word of God. But as he's growing and as he's progressing in his call and in his relationship with the Lord, he's getting more of a macro perspective of God's ultimate purpose. And it really spills out on paper in the book of Ephesians. We would call that even the high watermark of Revelation, right? It's some of the highest revelation. In fact, a cool side note is from Ephesians chapter 1 into Ephesians chapter 3 is the longest single run-on sentence in all of antiquity. It's a prayer that's nonstop. This man is so full. He's just unveiling what's in his heart, and it's even hard. He can't get it all out in one, like it all just spills out onto the paper. And it's so immense. It's so big. And part of that eternal purpose is that, we get an inheritance. When you get saved, the goal is not salvation. Okay, I know that sounds weird to some listeners, because if you come from an evangelical camp, you're thinking, well, I thought I just had to get saved and go get a ton of other people saved. Isn't that the Great Commission? Well, yes, it is. But even when you get other people saved, the goal's not just to get saved and stop there. If I look at all of the New Testament letters, remember, the Bible is written to Christians. Paul's writing to Christians in churches, and that most of his writings are full of warnings. And the warnings are, you must keep going, because it's not about just getting saved, because you can get saved and you can stay small, right? Your growth is not guaranteed. So if the goal is growth, then we need to keep growing and progressing. That's this process of transformation. Now I'll bring it back to your question.
Can I interject right there
please.
too, just to pile on to what you're saying and
to
the theme of Ephesians in 4, 11, and 12. That's another reason for the fivefold ministry, because it says those 5, right? evangelists, pastors, prophets, teachers, they are called to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So it's not just equip the saints to understand how to get saved and then go to bed.
Right.
It's do the work of the ministry. So go ahead.
No, and you can't have those verses without Ephesians 4:13. It's an excellent point, John. And the whole thing, we can culminate with this. If you look at Ephesians 4:13, it's until we grow, we mature, and we come into the measure of the full stature of the measure of Christ, right? So that's a picture of growth, a mature man. We could say a mature bride, right? There's four analogies for the body, the bride, a building, and a family, because it can't be contained in just one. So we have to grow and we have to mature to come into that place. Now, when we do, we know that, hey, I'll just say this. I know you know this, but for the listeners, I tell my guys this all the time. Heaven is not communist. So what's that mean? It means when we get there, there's going to be rank and reward. As one star differs from another, we're going to differ in glory. The amount of glory that you have, the proximity that you get to the throne is all dependent on conditional things that you do now. That's your process of growth. So that's your inheritance, right? You're going to get a crown, John. I want a crown, right? And so those crowns and the level of overflow that we bring with us into heaven that we're given as our reward is directly correlated to the reward that we give Jesus. So here's the question about the inheritance, which not everyone understands. It's rarely understood. It's not preached a lot. That's why. But God gets an inheritance in the saints. You can read this in Ephesians. He's made us an inheritance, but we get an inheritance. And it's interdependent. So if I get my inheritance, it's not selfish for me to want an inheritance. If I get that reward, Jesus gets his inheritance. They go together. If I don't get my inheritance, Jesus doesn't get his inheritance in me. That's the power of it, is that as we grow and mature, God's getting something from us. He wants to see you in full maturity. So there's so many places we can keep going with this.
That's deep. Yeah. No, that's deep. But I thought that was worth mentioning because it's not something that I see every day in that context. So I'm glad you said that. So as we get into part one, kind of touching on the dominion mandate and what you say we all want about more power, purpose, passion, peace, prosperity, those kinds of things. I guess what would be keeping us from the dominion, in your opinion, that we're called to possess? Like if you see this dominion that guys are called to have, what's preventing that from, I guess, us fully, I don't know, utilizing, fully inheriting, to use your word, like fully walking in that calling of dominion? What's preventing that?
Yeah, great question. So if I can, I'm going to define it really quick, because in Genesis 1:26, 1:28, we see God give these 5 commands to man, known as the dominion mandate. They're very simple: bear fruit, multiply, replenish, subdue, take dominion. Now, that's what he tells Adam to do in the garden. And the first thing we have to realize is a lot of times we've heard that. If you kind of grew up just traditionally like me, you might say, oh, it means like multiply, bear fruit, multiply, have more children, replenish the earth. And yes, it does mean that, but it means something else as well, because everything's spiritual first. God always starts in the spiritual, it goes into the natural. So I want to reframe this dominion mandate as 5 mindsets: that I should be bearing fruit with everything I do, that everything I touch should be multiplying, that I should be subduing and conquering the resistance that I come up against in life, that I should be taking dominion. We'll talk about what we take dominion over, but we're going to view this as a mindset, right? So what stops me from doing that is there's multiple things. There's enemies in our environment that want to stop us from moving into God's best. And when they do, and we'll just say this too, because, we're talking to a bunch of guys that are driven. I'm just going to define your audience as driven, or else they wouldn't be listening to your show.
Yeah.
And when you're driven and it's not aligned, it expresses in some weird ways. It turns into domination over people. It turns into climb the corporate ladder, step on everyone, do whatever I can to get there, cut corners in business, make as much money as I can. And even in good pursuits, why do men climb mountains? Why do they want to conquer different feats? It's because they have this God-given code within their DNA that they want to expand, grow, produce, progress, right? That's something God gave all men. So there's enemies that try to stop this. Number one, we have an enemy, right? And he doesn't want you to move into advancing God's kingdom and taking territory for for God's kingdom. So that can show up in a variety of ways. And we talk about this in the book, that obviously we'll look at what's in our environment. Like, I believe institutional religion can pose a big barrier for men. If you've been taught that God is a judge, you don't see him as a father. I mean, I know you've talked about this in the past, and we've probably had conversations on this, because if God wants to reveal himself to this generation as father, you obviously want to take fathers out of the home if you're the enemy. Like, let's mess up the understanding of what a father is, right? So we have that kind of enemy. We have distraction. We have social media. We have mixed marketing messages. We have all these things coming at us from different angles to distract us. And this is what I found, John, is that when the enemy really wants to get you, it's not so much this full-blown huge temptation all the time. It can be. Right. But that usually doesn't go like right to step one. It doesn't go 0 to 100. It usually starts with distraction. It starts with, he fractures your focus. And so God puts you on a plan to do something, and you're supposed to be working this plot of land, just like Adam's supposed to be working the garden, cultivating and keeping it. And what's he do? He lets his guard down. And all of a sudden something comes in and distracts. And then he finds himself just going with the flow. And he's no longer leading his wife, protecting his dominion. He's now like forfeiting all that territory.
Yeah. Now, I'm glad you clarified dominion misused, because that is, there is a division there on where your heart is and how you execute dominion. Because, it can be power over people, domination, those kinds of things, or the way you're talking about in our God-given gifts and callings and vision around dominion. So you kind of talked about God-driven vision, and then you touch on enemies. So that takes us right into, part two. And if I go through something and don't hit something you want to hit long enough, man, just tell me. But if we go into enemies of your environment and those kinds of things. So maybe unpack enemies on another level, aside from just the guy in the red leotard with the pitchfork. Let's talk about attacks on our relationships, like that you talk about. You talk about attacks on different areas: marriage, identity, mindset, attention, body. Talk about some of that, because I think that's important. Like, I think that is a broad brush, but it also it encompasses a lot of what dudes are going through in real time.
Right. And I want to say one thing about dominion as well.
Yeah.
So it's an awesome word, but it can be misused too. So just to be clear for the readers, when I talk about taking dominion and dominating, it's not over people. Right. It is, number one, over yourself. Nice. We see in Genesis chapter 4 that when Cain sins, the Lord says there's sins crouching at the door, and it seeks to dominate you. Sin wants to dominate you, right? Wow. So the first thing we do is we take dominion over ourselves. That's that self-leadership. And we take dominion over sin, right? And then as you expand your territory, Adam was told to take dominion over the garden. That meant the garden, the plant life could be unruly. It was going to grow. He had to unlock and unleash all the potential within this garden, organic life. And we have to do the same thing. So we do that in our sphere of influence. It's not over people, but I believe it's over systems, right? So you and I, we're both in sales. Let's be the best we can be, right? Let's exhibit servant leadership. Let's use the qualities of the kingdom to take dominion there and spread light and advance the kingdom of light wherever we go. So I want to make that clarification. The next thing, the critical component, John, is that I don't want to just gloss over really quick the GDV. So it's really important. When I talk about a GDV, it stands for God-driven vision.
Yeah.
Every man has to have a God-driven vision. And when I say that, I use that term to contrast and compare against the generic vision board exercises, right?
Sure.
Where you just like cut out what's your favorite car and where do you want to live and all that stuff. And I don't have a problem with that.
Close your eyes and grit your teeth real hard, right? Yeah.
Yeah, whatever it might be, and just dream and possibility thinking or hustle hard and that kind of culture. There's nothing wrong with encountering prosperity in your life, but if it's only for toys, if it's only for that type of stuff, it's going to fade real quick. It won't even bring fulfillment. So when I talk about a God-driven vision, it's really uncovering what's the specific call on your life, and it's going to be different from me, right? What's that look like with my natural talents, my spiritual gifts, acquired skill sets, things that God has deposited within me, the sphere of influence I'm in, the people I know, and really developing that. So that's the GDV component.
Well, and that was in my notes actually, but I did kind of just jump over it just because I know there's no reason to get the book if we cover every word, and
Or
then
not. Yeah.
B, I was gonna kind of go right into enemies because you had mentioned it, but I will say
Yep.
about the GDV, because I did like that. You talk about different seasons to solve different problems. So I did want to ask you, what's a problem you're solving in this season of life for you personally?
Wow. Great question. You know, the first thing we need to understand, just to frame this, is that whenever God wants to solve a problem, he uses a man.
Yeah.
He always uses a man.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means every single one that can hear my voice right now, you're raised up to solve a problem. And so the problem that I'm solving in this season would be, it's different in different
Yeah.
aspects of my life. With what we're doing on the podcast, with what I'm doing with Standard 59 and leading the mastermind that I'm running, the problem I'm solving is providing deeper purpose and understanding of the scripture so we can unleash and unlock our full potential, like the conversation you and I are having right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really thankful to say, and I'm kind of blown away from the feedback that we've been getting, that guys are finding community and brotherhood, and that they're finding, they're unlocking a new level of, like, we're talking about the inheritance. We're talking about this concept of
Yeah.
the overcomer, of all the stuff that we're called to do, but you have to go and hunt and really dig deep to find information like this. And then that information has to have a process where it becomes revelation to you, where it turns into transformation and then becomes manifestation in your life. So that's the process that I'm facilitating with the guys I'm working with now. And that's a problem I'm solving.
Yeah.
And it's for me as well, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
as we go into like work, obviously you and I, we provide solutions to customers and challenges that people face, and there's a reward in that. So
Yeah.
there's many different aspects, but that's probably the one right now that I'm really
Yeah.
pursuing.
That's good, man. And I would say almost if a guy is a vessel of his potential, you're taking the lid off of some of these guys who have maybe been capped for a time or a season, and maybe they lost sight of it. Maybe they never had sight of it. And you're kind of unleashing them into the kingdom. And I think that's powerful. I don't know if you're like me, but I know in Solomon talks about it in Ecclesiastes that, there's every time has a season, and there's always the timing's perfect, right? For that God's timing. But I just, think about, don't you wish you would have started this mastermind 20 years ago? Like, I wish we'd have got, been able to do some of this stuff a long time ago, because I'm starting to see, and there's plenty of time left, but I'm starting to see the power that is about what you and I are doing and the work we're doing. It would be, I just kind of wish, man, I would have liked to have been doing this my whole life, but there's a reason we weren't, and there's people take different paths, right?
Yeah, I have a really interesting perspective on that. Even though I may have wanted to do it, um, there's, what we're doing is we're taking people into a deeper spiritual life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
things operate differently here. It's not like going to school and getting a
Yeah.
degree and then saying, I'm
It's
going to go
true.
turn it into an occupation, a business, or some kind of enterprise.
True.
So the way God works is that he takes all of us on a journey. And I read something really powerful recently, that even a new minister, if someone gets saved, God bless all the guys that are getting saved. Give your life to the Lord, and it's a good thing to seek to want to minister and look to express and take opportunities. We all do that. That's all how we start. But I read something really deep recently that said, even like someone that goes right into like a pastoral ministry or any kind of ministry, do you realize that for at least the first 3 years, they're basically preaching messages to themselves?
Sure.
Because they don't really have the well to give from at that point.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the Lord will bless that ministry. He'll bless the people that hear it and listen to what they're doing. But most of that stuff, and you can even ask them, a lot of times we're ministering and it's for us, and the Lord's
Yeah.
just letting people listen and they're getting blessed by it. But it's not
Yeah.
until a later age, and when you get some more depth, when that well's deeper and you have more to give out. So,
Yeah.
I said this about myself
That's
with
good.
the Standard. I couldn't have wrote it when I was in my 20s. I couldn't have wrote the Standard in my 30s. I wrote it in my 40s. I needed more life experience to bring out the truth and the revelation that the Lord was giving me and that I was seeing. And so I'd like to
Yeah.
say I wish I started earlier, and in some ways, yes. But I also I'm not, as long as there's no disobedience in your life or my life,
Right.
I'm okay with it, because when we look at our Bible heroes, a lot of them didn't start their ministries until later in life. And
Yeah.
I personally would rather follow someone with more depth that can take me
Yeah.
deeper than someone with a lot of zeal. And I'm not trying to pit anyone against anyone, but I would rather have more depth for me, for where I am. So that's what I'm
True.
endeavoring to do. Right. And we all
Yeah.
meet people at different levels.
And I agree. I agree because I mean, the first 10 years of my walk with Christ, I needed the training. Let's just
Right.
say I needed to dig that well and develop. And like you said, there's a minor leagues for a reason, right? There's a preseason for a reason in sports. So yeah, I guess I'm glad because I wasn't in any position to, and not that I'm where I need to end right now because we're all progressively being sanctified and grown.
Yeah.
But so back to enemies a little bit. I mean, I
Yeah.
know we probably can't touch on every single thing, but
No, of course.
all these attacks that you're talking about. So go into some of these that maybe personalize it a little bit for your life and maybe where you've experienced a more significant attack. Maybe if it's your physical fitness and you've always stayed fit. Maybe it's your, I don't know, mindset or family
Mhm.
life. I mean, you don't have to get detailed, but yeah, give
Yeah.
us an
Yeah.
idea, personalize that.
Yeah, I talk about four or five main enemies there, and we hit one already, like the institutional religion, that major complex that keeps men in a performance mentality. We talk about attacks through the media, on marriage, the institution of marriage. One of the ones that I deal with, I think we all do, is it's the attack on our attention.
Yeah.
And the attack on our attention comes through consumerism. It comes through marketing. We're getting bombarded. I mean, if you have a smartphone, which we all do, I mean, you're constantly getting triggered, and all the designs, all the apps, all the ads are made specifically by behavior psychologists to keep you coming back to an app to get this dopamine drip of constantly feeling good. And we just talked about moments ago that when the enemy wants to distract you, when he really wants to get you, he brings distraction. He steals your focus. And so one of the ways that happens is through your phone, and whatever you're giving your attention to, that's what you're giving your affection to. So whatever you're doing there is robbing you from something else that you should be doing. It could be your relationship. How many times, I'm guilty of this, how many times have I've been in a conversation with my wife, but I'm half-heartedly listening because I got this, and hey, could you put your phone down? God
Right.
forbid we do that in our relationships with our children. And then just all that consumerism that's in the world that wants our attention and constantly calling for us. And none of the stuff, here's the big secret, is none of it makes you happy, right? It never makes you
Yeah.
fulfilled.
No, I hear you. Yeah, there's a lot of those attacks that, and the enemy, I think, knows which one. Well, I know he knows which ones are maybe my button versus your button, right? Or our
Right.
weakest point versus yours. So he knows those things. And I want to touch on something you mentioned. And I know when you say institutionalized religion and those kinds of
Mhm.
things, this is in line a little. It's not exactly that, but another quote that you had, because I liked it because, and I feel like I've been sort of hitting this topic more personally lately where when I'm trying to minister or have a word or something and I'm praying about it for this type of person. So you said in the part of identifying the resistance and kind of this war within, and you mentioned
Mm.
Christian nice guys. Okay.
Yeah.
So due to the religious programming, weak role models and mixed messages you have likely picked up from other nice Christian guys, you end up with an internal struggle.
Mhm.
Um, what's an example of kind of that Christian nice guy, and why are we being, I don't want to say influenced, but why is that sort of an attraction, or why is there a magnetism toward that guy?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's huge. I literally had men clip this and send me screenshots saying, "This is me. Like, you're nailing it for me right now." And for me, the whole thing, let's go back to what we said earlier. God put this desire in our DNA that we would
Yeah.
expand, that we would produce, right? And
Mhm.
that everything we touch would multiply. But then what happens is you come into Christianity and you look around, and we've talked before on, there's been different feminine influences within the church. And you
Mhm.
start getting this picture, especially if you're in a church where maybe, the women are controlling, or you're in a relationship like that. And all of a sudden it's got to start to be like, oh, I have to fit in. I'm supposed to be nice. You know, meekness turns to weakness. I got to get my khakis and my sweater, right? And just go with the flow. And I got to work in the children's church or whatever that stereotype might be. But I'm no longer aggressive. I'm no longer living with this expectation. This is why having a GDV is so important. And I just start going with the flow. And what happens is that man, if he's being honest with himself, still has a desire inside to expand and to grow. He still has a calling within his DNA that he wants to dominate something. Like, you're made to dominate. You're made to take dominion over something, not someone, but something, right? So what's that thing? What's that mountain you're supposed to climb? But if you're in this environment where you're like, no, we don't do that. We're just nice guys and we're here and we're passive. And like, I hate to say it, but some churches I've been in, like, the guy was greeting me at the door. I'm like, is this for real? Like, is that really the way you talk?
Right.
Right. Everyone
100%.
got softer. Everyone got smaller and milder. And I'm like, let's just be ourselves. Let's be transparent. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. And that doesn't mean I walk up to a woman. I'm like, hey, I'm Josh. Right. Like, no, we can adapt and we can flex our styles. But I'm talking about this passive man syndrome, this nice guy syndrome, which has you sitting. And this is why guys connect with this, because deep down they have this desire, and it's all around ambition. It's all around ambition, that they want to do something, but they've been programmed by Christianity to believe that any ambition they have is a selfish ambition. And so if you believe that, it's like putting your car in drive, like, I'm ready to go. And that's like, nope, throw it in park. Okay, put it back in drive. I want to go. Nope, throw it in park because I'm not sure. And you're second guessing and I really want that, but I don't know if I'm supposed to, or I don't know if I can. So that's why we have to align our ambition. So I want to tell everyone listening today, your ambition is not wrong. Ambition can be godly. Like, when we just painted that picture of the Apostle Paul running and pushing and striving and pressing, this guy's ambitious. Like, he's ambitious. He wants to take something over, right? So let's just align it. We don't have to make it super spiritual, but let's align your ambition. I think that's the push-pull where guys are like, I needed to hear this. I needed to hear that you're giving me permission that I can run my race.
Absolutely. And you know, it's time. I believe that the men need to be men again, and in the church especially. And let's face it, like, the women are going to look to who when it goes kinetic, right? I mean, if it's not us, then who? But I'm not saying that our only purpose is to be able to break stuff and you know, lift heavy things, but I think that men need to step back into some of that calling and what we were wired to do. Like, that's how we were created. And you talk about the two ditches, right, on the path, and then there's two ditches, and one being the one we just talked about, and then the other one kind of being that orphan alpha, you call it. I like that. I like that terminology where it's more about just self-made willpower, you know, just kind of try harder and grit my teeth a little tighter. And I wonder, is there a third ditch of, and this is just off the top of my head, I wrote this down, it's not in your book, but the pain, trauma, regret ditch, like, where people are maybe held back from something that happened in their life. And I know that could be a whole different book, but what do you say about if there might be a third bucket for somebody?
Yeah. So, and I do talk about that. I don't know if you got to the section.
I must have missed that part. Okay.
I got to the section. I wrote a section called male PMS, which I think you're nailing with that right there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it's not a ditch. So think about this. We'll make this really simple and quick. But if there's this road you're supposed to be on, the center of the road, you're kingdom driven, you're aligned, you're walking in your identity, you're pursuing God's call on your life, right? There's one ditch on the side of the road. I call that ditch one. That's the Christian nice guy. Here's your attitude. When you're a Christian nice guy, it's passive. So we all know someone, and I've been there, so I can tell you from experience, like, hey, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If God's going to open the door, he's going to open the door. I mean,
let go and let God, right?
Right? Let go and let God. I think it's a bumper sticker, right? And then you'll tell me, like, we both wrote books, John. So it might be like, hey, it would be so awesome if, like, a publisher would just call me and they would take the book, and, like, I could sit around and get, and I guess it didn't happen. So it wasn't meant to be.
It's God's plan. Right.
I'm waiting on God. And let's just define, waiting on God is biblical, but waiting on God is actually not passive at all. No. It's very expectant. It's active. It's not something where I sit back and I'm being lazy about things.
Right.
On the other side of the ditch, this is where I would put most of the men's movements that I see out there right
Sure.
now that are not Christian, right? They don't have a biblical framework, and they're not grounded in kingdom principles, and they're not grounded in the King, which is Jesus.
Yeah, the pendulum swings all the way over, doesn't it?
Pendulum swings. So then what happens is this orphan alpha mentality, and I call it that for a reason. So the fake alphas, the rise of the fake alphas that we see, it's like, if it's meant to be, it's up to me, right? There's no God in the equation. I control everything, and I'm going to manipulate my circumstances through sheer willpower and force. And guess what? You can, and it works.
The zero F's mentality, right? I don't give a about
that's
what
it.
anybody
you know
says, thinks, or does.
And you can, and a lot of times it's driven by prove your haters wrong and all that stuff.
Sure.
But even at its most, like, if we clean it up and make it the best version we can be,
right?
If it doesn't have God in it, it's out from the source of self, right?
Sure.
So it's out from the source of self. So they both operate from self.
That's
one
right.
is kind of like self-pity. The other one's self-effort. And I talk about a guy in the Bible who did this. He did this exact thing. He's called Cain, Abel's brother. And he brings an offering to the Lord. And I call it the Cain condition. He did the best what he could do, but he wasn't obedient to what God told him to do. Yeah. And so that leaves you, the word is this: you're striving. Now you're trying to make it happen on your own. And so those are two prevailing mindsets. A couple pages after, in the next chapter, maybe, I touch on something I call male PMS. And for me, that's the cycle we get stuck in, which I call the PMS is pain, medicate, shame. So we feel pain, whatever that trauma is, a past trauma, feeling let down, could be in your marriage or work, whatever you've been through. That pain triggers something where you want to self-medicate. Choose your medication of choice. And guys, nothing's off limits here. Like, porn, right? Alcohol, drugs. How about this? Food, work, fitness.
Yeah,
can be medication.
Hey, whoa, right? Not fitness. Come on now, hey,
dude, you have no idea, because I came from a bodybuilding lifestyle.
I know you did. I know
bodybuilders are the most vain people, and they're very insecure, and everything's about them, right? So I'm just saying, to any extreme, anything to an extreme,
anything that's an idol
form of self-medication. Yeah. Just like work. Work is a good thing. Work is a God thing, but I could hide behind it and do all these things to fill a hole. And that leads to shame eventually. So it's PMS and we get stuck there.
That's good. I don't know how I missed that, to be honest. That's my bad. That fell right in line with my question. Maybe there was a reason I asked it. Obviously it tracked with where you're going, but I just overlooked it.
You know, the whole point of like me framing up, like, where does PMS come from? It comes from guys doing nothing. Right. I get to this point in the book where I'm like, hey, I'm about to show you a protocol that we use. But before I do, let's look at what most people do. And the number one thing that people do is nothing. Like, most people do nothing. And that's when they fall into that cycle.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'll go into part 3, which we're talking about kingdom-driven order here. And it's talking about bringing from chaos to order. And you identify 3 lies of the enemy, obviously, and the design. Let's see, you talk about align, design, and then weaponize optimize. Yeah. So maybe just scratch the surface on that, give them something to hunt for in the book without having us give them the answers to the test. So talk about, because I appreciated that one too.
Yeah. So what I've been doing, I've been working with these guys in this group that I formed, and I developed a protocol that I call the kingdom-driven order. And it's like, hey, when we're in the chaos of life, how do we transform it to order? Where God always brings order to chaos. We see it in Genesis 1, right? And it comes by when light enters, all the chaos turns into order because God speaks. And so similarly, we have to have something that brings order to our life. And I find that principles are important. To operate by principles. Now, methods can change, but principles don't change. So I put together a protocol, and it starts with aligning. It's align, design, weaponize, and optimize. And I'll go through this at a 30,000-foot view. You'll get all the details in the book. But the align part is where we start, because you first have to understand who you are. So that starts with aligning with your identity. If you don't know who you are, if you don't know who God is, you won't know who you are, and you won't know how to relate to your world. So that's the most important thing that every man needs, is to understand who God is and who they are. And when we get that right, we start coming into freedom. We start like moving beyond the basics into, okay, now I can get my vision. Now I can start to exercise. I can start to work my protocols. I can start to do the things I need to do to take dominion in life. But if you're trying to do something without being someone, it's totally backwards. It's actually the definition of religion. So if you're just trying to be things and get more strategies and more tactics, just give me the stuff, but you don't know who you are, oh man, you're in the enemy sweet spot. So we have to know who we are, right? So it's always be and then do.
That's
And
good.
our being, that's our state of being. Like, who are you? Like, how do you operate? How do you show up? So how do we give you this new operating system? It starts with understanding your identity. After that is designing. You know, I talked about one of the things that I deal with is like, we're on a computer right now. We're surrounded by technology. There's a lot of things that are competing for our focus, just with the fast pace of life as well. So here's the cold hard truth. The way you lived your life today, the way you lived your day today is the way you're living your life. Like, it's a
the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And like, whatever you live today, like, that's the way you're living. Like, that's what you live every day. Right. So you're like this compounded truth of like who you are. So if you want to take dominion in life, it starts with taking dominion over your day. I need to get a hold of like, how do I start my day? And like, yeah, we're going to get into some structure stuff. And there's some secrets here. And the one breadcrumb I'll drop now is that if we look at the high performance habits of Jesus, he starts every morning in prayer at a certain place, right?
Yeah.
In Matthew 6:6, he calls this his prayer closet. David calls this the secret place. Moses met with God in a place called the tent of meeting. So we all have a tent of meeting in our life where we start every day with the Lord. We start every day in the Word. And there's certain protocols and things we do in our tent. I'll call it our tent, our daily tent of meeting. So that's really important. But there's many things we have to do to take control over our day, to set the boundaries, the guide rails to what are we saying yes to, and then that will determine what we have to say no to. So that's the design portion or next step of the framework. And then the next one after that is weaponize. You know, you said this too, John. When you get saved, you're enrolled in a battle. Like, you're born into a battle, whether you realize it or not. It doesn't take, you know, too hard to see. Look out your window, turn on the news, look at the culture. But there's dark forces, nefarious forces that are controlling different aspects of life. You represent the kingdom of light. And you're immersed into this battle, this cosmic battle of darkness versus light. And you also have to take territory with the way you live your life. And that starts with your mindset. How do you even view yourself? Right. So when you first get saved, you're a child, you know, you come in as a child of God. I'm raising children. But when you get to the right age, you have to flip that mindset and understand that I'm no longer a child. I now have to view myself with this military mindset. That doesn't mean every single thing's a fight. It doesn't mean that. But what it means is I take where I am seriously. So if I look at the Apostle Paul's letter to his spiritual son, Timothy, he's telling Timothy, like, here's the playbook for you. He's telling him, stop thinking like a civilian, right? Start viewing yourself this way. Take on the mindset of a warrior. Divorce yourself from civilian affairs. Live at a different level. I'm going to show you how to unlock your potential. That means number one, you have to be aware and you're going to walk a certain way. So how does I mean, you've interviewed a lot of Navy SEALs and people from high level military backgrounds. Do they live different?
Yeah. And I will too add to that, even when they're standing watch, they're not just standing asleep, right? They're prepared for battle. In just standing. And in Paul's second letter at Church of Corinth, he's talking about stand firm, right? Be watchful, act like men, right? Stand firm in the faith. So when he says stand, he doesn't just mean get out of your seat. I've heard people say it doesn't just mean physically just go to your, it means stand firm and steady and ready for battle.
Yes. Yeah. You know, that's the third part of Ephesians. We stand. Right. That's a military posture. So very, very excellent point. So you armor up for the fight, you weaponize, and that's how you do it. And there's a lot of different resources that are available to us in the spirit realm. There's natural gifts, there's talents, there's things we have. So we start to walk down. What does that look like to armor up? What's it look like practically to do that? And then the last portion of the framework is optimize. And to me, that's that that's that idea of constantly getting better in everything we do, that we're always progressing. So if we look at the Lord's instruction to the children of Israel, specifically Joshua, when he's bringing him into the promised land, and just so you know, it's a perfect metaphor for this because the promised land was their land, their inheritance, to connect it back with what we started with.
That's right.
And here's the thing about their inheritance and your inheritance, by the way. It was being illegally squatted on by enemy occupiers, right? So to possess the land, he had to dispossess the enemy. So there's a lot of weaponizing that has to happen with the way you go in and you get the enemy's hands off the stuff that God wants you to handle. So that's number one.
You're not drawing a metaphor into what our today's world looks like, and as far as our country right now, are you? Okay, I just want to make sure. You didn't get political right there, did you?
I can. I mean,
when
listen,
you said squatters, I was like, what?
Oh no, I didn't even mean that. But you know, we have these giant Nephilim and in the promised land sitting on the real estate. He's got to go in and clear them all out, right?
Sure.
And
we're about to have to do that. I'm with you.
We have to do that, and we have to do that in the spirit realm, right? We're fighting against evil forces and principalities and powers. We're not fighting against people, but there's forces and powers that control the people, and that's where we fight.
Yeah.
And this whole thing about optimizing, John, is that when the Lord tells Joshua, I'm going to bless you and I'm going to give you the land, it's not like, hey, I'm just going to give it all to you. I'm going to give it to you everywhere your foot treads. So he has to walk it out. It's a picture of, as he keeps walking, he keeps taking territory. So that's that daily walk. And to me, that's that optimizing part where we're getting better. So in the optimizing part of the framework, I get into your faith, your family, your fitness, and your finances. Those are practical areas that as men, we should all be taking territory in, right? Am I being a good steward with my finances? Am I multiplying? Am I managing well? How about my fitness, right? We can do the same thing with that. Obviously our family, as a husband, as a father, and
what's your, I guess my question there would be, what is maybe it's a two-part question. Maybe it's all the same question, but what's God working on you the most in those areas, or what maybe is the steepest learning curve for you or has been of those aspects of optimize?
Yeah. The 4 F's. Marriage and family, right? That's
you feel like God's working on you more in there, or you feel like that just personally, you feel like that's the area of growth that you have most?
Yeah. I would say both, personal question, but yeah, I'd say both. Fitness, I've been doing it for a long time. Like, I know what I'm doing. I know how to do it. Money,
finance is pretty locked in.
I can get other people to help me manage it. I can do things there.
Yeah.
The family thing is like, I live here. Like, this is my house, right? Like, I have to show up every day. I have to make sure that I'm on guard. I have to make sure that I'm stewarding my family. I'm leading my children, my wife. Like, hey, if you really want to know the real person, right, you live with them, you'll see everything. Right. So I think God designed marriage. He designed family, where it's beautiful, it's awesome, it's amazing. And it's going to uncover anything that's selfish within you, like those tendencies, those little things that you kick back, those things or thoughts where you want to like get the last word in. All that stuff is an opportunity for me to die to myself and to be conformed to Christ. So I don't have to look too far to understand God's plan for me and how he uses all of my circumstances to bring me into alignment with his image.
I love it because, I mean, that's parallel. You and I, you talk about how we live sort of a similar life and have had similar experiences. I think we're similar in that because anywhere that God wants me to put my money where my podcast mouth is, it's in my family. Like if I'm talking about something, I get a chance to prove it every day within the 4 walls of my home. No, and so I think God has a sense of humor, but he also has a purpose for this platform we've been given. We're not just called to talk about it, called to be about it. And that's, our family is the biggest test for me anyway. That's my biggest test of how to actually walk this out.
Yeah. It's a kingdom principle. I learned it early on, and then I've seen it play out with the podcast. But whenever you say something, and it doesn't matter if you're behind a microphone or not, but whenever you say something, you will be tested on it. So if you want to bring a message, if you're bringing a solo cast, I've done many, and I throw something out there, you better believe I know when I'm saying it. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
Now I'm going to get tested on this, and the enemy is going to be like, okay, let's see if he really meant what he said.
100%. 100%. Okay. I want to read out of that civilian and warrior mindset, the, up in I believe it's up in weaponized, but I skipped over it, but
it is.
it may be one of the most, I don't know, one of my favorite quotes in the book, but the way you prepare and live in one season qualifies you for promotion in the next.
Yeah.
It seems pretty elementary. And when you hear it conceptually, everybody's like, oh, well, yeah. But dude, there's never been truer words spoken. And talk about that, because I think, and I don't know who said it before Drew Brees, but since I'm a Saints fan, I'm going to say Drew Brees came up with it. But he said the will to prepare is more important than the will to win. So talk about preparation, maybe that grinding in obscurity, that, you took a time where you were just in the dirt, hand in the dirt, like work in the last 12 months or so, just preparing yourself, preparing resources, preparing your ministry. Like, talk about that for guys who think promotion just comes if you make a commitment to it.
Yeah. We talked about how honor is a key to promotion. Well, one of those things that is also a key to promotion is your preparation. And why don't we look at the life of Jesus, right? He went through all these different seasons. And probably one of the most powerful seasons he went through is he went through a season of obscurity where no one knew who he was, right? So you have the Son of God, and he's growing, Luke 2:52, he's growing in all aspects. He's serving in a wood shop or a carpenter shop or a mason shop, whatever. He was a builder, right? He probably built with wood and stone and everything. And he's handling customer service. He's, preparing, he's submitted, he's learning. Hebrews 5 said he grew in obedience, right? He learned through obedience what brought him into his full stature as Son of Man, not Son of God. And so he went through this process that we go through. Like, there is no shortcut. One of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded was an episode that I call God Breaks the Man Before God Makes the Man. So if you want to be used by God, there's going to be a breaking. And some people don't understand that. What do you mean God breaks me? Can't you just say he disciplines? It's because the secret's within the seed. So when Jesus talks about, unless a seed falls into the ground, right, it has to break that outer shell. So there's this shell, and the shell has to split so the life can come out. And that happens through trials and suffering and circumstances that don't always feel good to my flesh. So really practically, that could be like someone's listening right now, they hate their job, or they just got passed over for a promotion, or their boss is taking advantage of them, whatever that might be. Their friends have abandoned them. They're going through a season of unjust accusation. How you respond now will qualify you for what God's about to do for you. So preparation comes in many ways, but he's always watching. And here's the thing. If we fail that test, whatever test we go through, you get to take it again. I just don't want to take it over and over and over again. So pass the test with your attitude, with your mindset, staying submitted to the process and preparing. And that just means, to me, keeping my head down and doing what the Lord called me to do. Right now we have so many people, if you open up, IG and YouTube, there's so many people that have built platforms and they got virality by criticizing other people's ministries.
Sure.
It's huge right now, right? I'm probably, if I start doing this to other people, maybe I'll get more views or
just
something,
get polarizing. Yeah, absolutely.
Get super polarizing, use some clickbait, pull other people down, point out their deficiencies. And, that's not my thing. So I say, stay in your lane. Like, what's the lane the Lord called you to walk in? Stay in your lane. And that preparation, that season that you go through of keeping yourself right and humble, that's going to cause your promotion and bring you into your next season.
Yeah. And I also draw attention to the parallel with the pruning that the Bible talks about in the vine, right? And so sometimes in life, when you're in that preparation stage, there might be some things that need to be cut away, right? There might be some trimming and pruning that needs to be done. You just have to ask God to reveal that, and he will. He's faithful for that. But get some people around you too. And maybe I talk about, as we close up shop, we'll talk about part 4 just real briefly about the environment. And I'm going to just throw in who you hang out with as part of your environment. And you talk about telling the truth, honoring your word, vision, and excellence. But talk about maybe as just environment aggregately, what can guys do to make that optimal for the dominion you're talking about here and being dominion driven?
Yeah. Environment is everything, right? So we even have the latest studies in psychology that show us that willpower is a limited force. So it's limited. It's a limited resource. So if you've ever tried to diet, if you've ever said, hey, I'm starting on Monday, and you start the day great, I've been there, and then you mess up by the end of the day, you only have so many units of willpower. They eventually run out, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just sheer white knuckling your way through it. You have to be in an environment that supports you. Right? You need to be around the right resources, the right tools. And, biblically, we see Jesus do this. The first thing he does is he pulls his crew together and he puts them in the right environment. They're all going to be together now. And he changes their location. So that's another principle. Changing your location doesn't mean I physically have to move, but I'm changing my location of who I'm hanging out with, who I'm associating with. So that principle is true. Like, who you hang out with is what you're going to end up being. So that's such a key principle. So, true transformation, the book is full of, I'd like to say it's full of wisdom and tools and resources that can help you, but ultimately to take it from information, and we do need information, but to take it from information and help it translate into transformation, you need to be in an environment. You need to be in a community that supports you.
Yeah.
And there's numbers of ways you can do that, right? So I have one, and I have, I have a little soft invite in the book if you want to learn more about what I do.
Right.
But there's people, there's churches, there's men's groups where people are invested together to go further, and there's accountability. But I will say this, it is challenging to find a place where you can open up, be real, be vulnerable, be transparent, more than just a superficial level, and have the right biblical systems around you with Jesus as the center and the supreme focus. It's harder to find, because what I found with most traditional men's groups, there's some really good ones out there. There's some amazing ones. But there's also some within churches that are just, they end up being, and it's kind of like barbecue, UFC, and we get together, and it's superficial stuff. And it's like, hey, I want to go deeper with somebody. Like, I want to go deeper into this process. What's that look like? So this book can be a first step in taking you into that. So that's why I wrote it. And that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing.
Love it. And so to close out, tell the guys how your environment is expanding a little bit. You're being called to come and speak and minister in other locations, and your reach is broadening. So talk about some of that cool multiplication to speak of that we were talking about. Talk about some of that, how God's working.
Yeah, thanks, John. Something really awesome the Lord has done just sovereignly. I didn't do this on my own. I never put press kits together. And, there's a level when you have a podcast, right? You have to do some level of self-promotion and posting. And there's nothing wrong with that if you have a message that you need to get out there. But recently, over the past year, I've had a couple churches reach out to me, a couple men that kind of just popped up on my radar and said, hey, we got your book, or you were recommended to us, and we want to have you come speak. So I just got back recently from speaking at Overcome Church in Greenville, South Carolina. We did a men's event there. Was amazing. I'm going to be releasing that message on my podcast, and we're going to release it on YouTube as well if guys want to check out the message that I brought there. And I got invited in September. I'm going to be in the Northeast, in Pennsylvania. There's actually a church in New Jersey. They're doing a getaway in the woods of Pennsylvania. We're going to do a weekend together. We're going to do 4 deep dive sessions, discussion, facilitation, all around the standard. So I'm really excited about that, and just open to more ministry opportunities, because I love writing, I love speaking, and there's something really important about having a teaching gift and stewarding that well. But I love being in the environment with the guys, because there's a transfer of power, right? And it comes through the laying on of hands. It comes through prayer. It comes through being with someone. That's why Jesus had people with him. And there's this impartation when we're near each other, right? When we're in proximity.
2 or more, when 2 or more are gathered. Yeah.
So I'm excited about that. And,
good, man.
For future stuff that's coming up, you can find it all on standard59.com, standard59.com. And hey, I want to give this gift. I want to give this book to your listeners. So if they made it this far, is it okay if I share?
Well, I tell you what, I will say, I'm going to let you do what you want to do, but I will say I'm almost going to just put your email address down there, and to get it, they have to email you. and request that the book, that way you get an email address. But no, yeah, tell them where to get it,
Well,
and then we'll do
listen,
both.
I need your email address because it's actually going to be sent to you, right? So it's going to be
Okay, there
automatically
you go.
sent so you can download it right away. So
All
I
right,
actually need the address to send it there. So I appreciate
cool.
that. But right now, I just set something up really quick. If you go to kingdomdrivenbook.com, kingdomdrivenbook.com, you'll get the book, be downloaded to your computer in a matter of seconds after you put your email in there. We'll get it out to you. Now, I will tell you, you know this, John, because you read the standard, and I know you looked at this, even the digital copy. We did some really cool artwork. We set it up in a cool way because everything I do, I want to make it so if you have it in your library, you're like, no, this copy's mine. You can get your own, right? Like I want there to be some pride of
I
ownership
love
to it.
the graphics and the logo of that book. Like I think I need a KD logo shirt. Like I
It's on
need
the
that
way, man.
kingdom
We're making it
driven,
right
baby.
now. So
Oh,
we're gonna have
nice.
some gear up on Standard
Cool,
59
cool.
soon. I'll get
Nice.
something out to you. But yeah, so if you want to get the book on Amazon, it's actually better for your brain to read a hardcover book,
Right.
underline it, writing it. But I
Yeah.
do everything. I do audiobooks, Kindle. Audiobook will be coming out soon, but you
Cool.
can find it on Amazon or just go to kingdomdrivenbook.com or my website and we'll have it there so you can get it immediately.
Bro, it's been an honor. It's been fun. It flew by.
Yeah.
We got to do this more than once every 18 months, man. But I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you for sending that. Well done. Audience, with that, he's been the one and only Josh Khachadourian. We've been last in line. Be blessed.